Now let's make the cove cuts for the crown molding for the kitchen wall cabinet thingy box. Welcome back, shop and channel and stuff. And time to do the cove molding for the crown molding that's going on the box over there. Now that you have a general idea of how this jig works, or how to make a jig, or how to use a jig like this to do cove molding, crown molding on your table saw, let me tell you what I've had to make a slight modification how things work here. So let's get close in and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I've chosen the angle I want and the angle of the blade I want to get the cut that I want. And here's a picture of the online tool I use from Fine Woodworking. I've got the notes right here. And what I wanted was a cove of about 4/10 of an inch, or excuse me, 0.4, yeah, 4/10 of an inch, just under 5 inch, and a desired length of 1 3/4 inches. So this is what I've set up the cutter for. Now, some instances when you've got it turned, more of a shallow angle to the blade, you can get locks in these two slots here for into the miter slots. With an obtuse angle like this, you can't do that. So what I did was I made some long clamps to go from the miter slot over to here to hold it down here and here. Make sure it's nice and tight. What I did is I bought some of these T-slot. These are 5/16 thread T-slot things for clamping into the T-slot of my miter slot. And the way I did it, I took some 5/16 thread rod and red Loctite and put the red Loctite on here, and then clamped it up tight in the T-slot so I'd get the air out, because Loctite is an anaerobic sealant or glue. It means it cures without air or oxygen, so things need to be kind of tight, which I did. So that's never coming off. So basically, the way it works here is I put it in the T-slot here. Now I've got, see a little bit of Loctite on there? So I can tighten it down here and tighten it down here. So now I know that it's really locked down and it's not going to move. And the other thing that allows me to do is remove this guide here. Actually, just get it out of the way so sliding the workpiece in is easier. I'll leave that one on up at the other end. And then what also comes with, I didn't point out earlier, is it comes with a feather board that goes directly in the slot here. And here's a sample piece that I'll do some cute. You always do test pieces. And the sample piece, get this over the blade a little better. Now, I did that just now to get these two pieces of metal straight, because they were kind of twisted. And then now I can push it down onto the workpiece. You don't need a lot of pressure here. You're just going to hold it down. It's not really going to push the workpiece up. So there it is. This is my final setup to do the cove molding. Now I'm going to do a couple of test pieces to make sure it's correct off camera, and then I'll start running the final piece through a couple of times on camera, and then finish it off camera. Like I said, I wanted 0.4 inches of depth, which I'll measure after a while as I'm cutting it. The cove length of 1 3/4 inches, and the actual desired offset is 0.25, or a quarter of an inch, for that offset of the cove itself. And it turns out the fence angle is 68 degrees. The blade tilt is 34 degrees, so it's 68 and 34. And the verified cove length will be 175, which you are going to measure this stuff after you've run it through a while to get to exactly where you want to go. Now, if this is off 2 or 3 degrees either way, if that's off 1 or 2 or 3 degrees, it doesn't matter because it'll look the same. You won't even notice any difference. If you run it through at this and move this a little bit and run it through again, you won't even really notice. What I'm looking for is as we would say, the gross image in your eye. So the image that you see when you look at it the first time, and that's what sets it off. You're not going to see the 2 or 3 degrees that it might be off if you haven't got this absolutely correct. Now that you know where I want to go and how I'm going to get there, let's do a couple of passes just to make sure I've got it really centered on the workpiece. I have to tell you, this is a lot wider than the final piece, but I wanted room to work around for trim. We want to put a bead detail around the bottom of this and maybe a cap detail. I'm not sure, but we'll see. So let's go ahead and start making some cuts and get ourselves some Cove molding for the crown molding. Let's make a couple of passes of this, make sure I've got it centered the way I want, and it's going to make the cut. I mean, I know from previous experience making the test pieces that this is going to come out the way I want it, but I want to make sure I'm kind of centered in the workpiece, if you know what I mean. Not that it really is necessary because it's so wide, but what the heck. So let's make a couple of passes, and then I'll come show you what I got, and then we'll come down and do a couple of passes close up, and then I'll go and start with the main piece, and this is the main piece. This is all the moldings coming out of this one piece of wood right here. I need 36 inches. I got 48 inches there, I think. I've got a good look at how it went through there. Now I've got my test cut to this point, and I'm almost at 0.4 inches tall. And yeah, I just about right. I got a little bit more to get to the 1 3/4. So let me make a couple more passes in this test piece, and then we'll start doing the real deal. So there it is. That is the finished Cove that I want. Yeah, finished Cove. The way I got the measurements, of course, is I take a scale and go across it, and it's 1 3/4 inches. To get the depth, I take a scale and stick it on top of there, and then I'm using a decimal. It's about 10 thousandths over, but I'm not concerned. It's fine. So that's my profile. So now I have to run the big piece through, and you saw with the little piece how it works coming out of the saw. You can see the material has been removed. You know the process. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and run this through, get it to where I want it, and then we can go on to the next step in making crown molding for the box. Well, okay then. So I've got the Cove sanded to the level that I like. And once the first coat of shellac goes on and I give it a light sanding, it'll get even smoother. But it's down to 220 grit. Now, this little template, well, here's a picture of the finished side profile, cross-section of what it's going to look like. What I'm working on now is the part without the 2 beads that you see in that picture. And out of this hunk of wood comes this profile here, and it's all marked both ends so I can make the cuts. And the cuts are all 45 degrees. So that makes it kind of easy, I think. Maybe. We'll see. I've done this a few times before. Well, a couple. So now I want to get started by ripping off the edges and preparing this finally to go up here with the bead. Now, there's a few other steps. I think I've talked about them earlier. There's a few other steps that have to happen as well, because there's going to be a cleat that's going to hold this on the box, and then I can once this is on the box, then I can do the bead detail on the top and the bottom. So then table saw. And for this, I put on the overhead I've been using this more often now. I've got an overhead, there's a video of me installing this, an overhead whole shop filter system. It's a DeWalt. I used to have another one up there for years, for a couple of decades, and it finally died and there are no parts available for it. So now what I need to do now is make the first cut. So it doesn't matter where, I've marked at both ends for the angles, so it doesn't matter where I make the first cut. But what I want to do is basically I'm going to sneak up on it to make that first cut. And the way to do that, as you can see, I'm bending over and away from the camera. I'm getting as close as I can. Then I'll turn the saw on and slowly move the piece into the blade until it bisects the pencil line. It bisects the pencil line. So let me make that cut and I'll show you when I'm done. There's the first cut there. I have to nip that corner off because this is the bottom. And now I will make this cut here. And then when I do this cut on this side, I can flip it over to make that nip cut there. So there it is. There's the finished profile. It goes like this. And then there'll be a piece of wood up here with a beaded edge. And then below here on the cabinet, there'll be a bead that rides underneath here. So we have bead on top and bead on the bottom. I will nip this corner, this edge here, just a little bit to get a little bit of a shadow line between the beaded piece I want to make on the table, so on the router table, and when it sits up on here. So basically, the assembly process you'll see is this goes on first. There'll be a cleat here to mount it correctly. Then this goes on first. Then the beaded board goes up here, and the bead goes down here. And this weighs almost nothing compared to what it weighed before. So that's where it's going to go, right there. Next step is to make the beaded parts, and I don't know if I want to put those on camera because I've done several videos of making beaded parts on the router table. But let's move on from here. I think I need to do a few more things in the box before I can put the crown molding on, and there also will be some base molding. It's just going to be like an OG or something like that. So let's move on to the next step. So you saw in that time lapse that I dragged some wood through the router table to make the top bead. That's the top bead. I hope you can see it. That's the top bead. And then the bottom bead will not be connected to this. The bottom bead will be connected to the cabinet itself, because it's really, I don't have a shelf to put that on here, but nevertheless, I've already cut it out. I have to rip off the actual beaded side of it. And then once it's up, that's the way that's going to work. Now I need to put that cleat I was talking about on the back here so that I can start putting it up. Now the cleat will not go all the way to this edge. It'll be a 1/60th of an inch or so in this way. And that is so as I put it up onto the cabinet, it has a stop and it'll be symmetric, completely symmetric. And I can put it up, each piece up with a couple of pins, with a pinner, and then get everything established, and then come on the top and drill and do the screws on the top to hold the whole thing in place. So yeah, we're moving on. Anyhow, so what I'm going to do is end this video here because we're bumping up against 20 minutes again. And the next step is to finish the crown molding, get it mounted in place. I'll have it cut The finicky bits is cutting it and going back and forth between the chop saw to get, the length width correct and the corners correct. I'll get all that done, and then we'll fasten it up in place and then put the bead detail on. And then next step after that is to paint the interior with milk paint, which I have to mix. Dark blue, white, mix it together, get the pale blue that Mara wants. The last thing to go on, of course, is the finish, the regular finish, which I'm debating whether I want to wipe that on or spray it on. That's the amber shellac, over which we put the wipe-on polyurethane for added strength and protection. So until next time, make great things out of wood.